Good evening, Galleon. Mayor Tom O'Leary here. Happy to be here on another Monday night. We're working here feverishly before we opened up the live stream to put together a little graphic. I wanted to start this evening by recognizing, a couple hands full of different community groups and businesses that spent I'm told over 300 hours over the weekend getting mulch in the flower beds in Heisey Park and generally giving it an early start on looking like spring. In fact, I was just through the park and there were a couple of people near the Little League field that were finishing up or working on one of the flower beds or one of those bedded areas there. So I don't know, are we able to display those names?
Yes, they will be up here.
Yeah, okay, so we don't have much footage, but we do have a list of names of the people who volunteered, and so we want to run those. While we're talking on the subject of cleanup, I believe it was representatives from both the Friends of the Depot, the Big Four Depot, and the Galleon Depot Inc. that worked, I think this was the second of 2 weekends. I conveniently had other things to do, good evening. But they made a lot of progress up there, and we're really trying to get the building picked up, cleaned up in a way so that when a contractor comes in to do the woodwork and the drywall on the second floor, there's really not much time wasted, money wasted in having them do things that community volunteers can do. So 2 real big projects in the area of community volunteering and contributing, and so we wanted to recognize those. Really the city's small role in the mulch project was to buy the mulch and drop it in some areas. Then, as I understand it, was wheelbarrowed to the different. Don't realize how many flower beds are in Heisey Park until you start mulching them up. But real nice project, and again, I can't tell where I'm sitting. Are those names going up there? Should I read them? Okay. Want to switch gears a little bit before we go to questions. It's funny, the topics come and go. Oftentimes, Matt and I talk about. I talk with my wife about how frequently we do this, and I think we've come to accept that some nights you have a lot of interest, other nights you don't. And so tonight's one of those nights that I'm glad we are working every week to put together information, because there are 2 major issues. I'm not sure how to at the State House level, and I think I'll take the one I'm not quite sure if it'll be interesting to see how it sorts out. And you may have been reading in other news outlets about a piece of legislation numbered Senate Bill 157. And basically what that does is absolves or removes the obligation of people who have been working from home during the COVID crisis. I think there's a certain set of dates in the bill, from paying any local income tax. And so today the cry went out from Rita, and the message in that notification, or that cry for legislative support or help, was that Galleon could lose up to $650,000 worth of income tax. Well, as mayor, that's like, wow, that's a lot of money. We better take a close look at that, and indeed we are. I do understand it's residents who work out of town and who pay income tax for living here, who are generally upset with Rita. So I think among some of the viewers and people who will catch this on a replay or through the Facebook handoff will think this is really good legislation. So the only thing I'll commit to tonight is to get fully informed on the legislation and try to, although I don't like to straddle the line, but we'll try to. What I want to know is how Rita is so clear on exactly that number. I don't have the number memorized, but it was not a rounded off number. So it's kind of interesting. There's I've been reading that in other newspapers, as I said a minute ago. So we'll see exactly how it impacts Galion. I think with the number of people who live outside of Galion, who work outside of Galion, who live here, it's hard to say whether or not they were working from home or not. So it'll be interesting to see how that data has been collected, and so stay tuned on that. But there may be some relief, a squeeze on the city budget, but relief for individual taxpayers, and we'll keep you informed of that. Other issue is involves our local city health department. I think it's more urgent, and I don't think you have to. Doesn't take much time to decide which side of the issue you're on. And I had an opportunity to talk to Representative Reardon McLean today. He's really was. You couldn't ask for more in terms of his response. I sent him a text early this morning, and within 15 minutes he called back. He'd been working on the issue, and although we're the only city health department in his legislative district, that being Galion, he was really pretty well informed about it, and spoke of other legislators, including former Mayor of Shelby, former Richland County Commissioner, and now current State Rep Marilyn Johns, very familiar with how city health departments operate and are funded. And so the message in this legislation that was tucked in as an amendment to the state budget bill, and I'll come back to that in a second, because that is irritating in and of itself. But the amendment would eliminate city health departments in communities with populations of 50,000 or less. And while I don't have an accurate absolute, there are probably a couple of dozen communities like Galion that continue to operate their own city health department. And this legislation would eliminate those under 50,000. So we're quite concerned about that. I think over the past year that the city health department has done a lot in terms of their response to COVID, and certainly over the last several months when the vaccines become available, they've been right on the front line of providing vaccinations to a lot of Galion area people. So wanted to make you all aware of that. I got kind of a fire alarm from one of the supervisors up at the city health department. Spent a little time over the weekend looking into it, and then really was pleased to find that Representative McLean was real knowledgeable about it, and was already working on it. A couple of things that are worth mentioning. Going back a year when all of this COVID stuff started, if you listen closely to the governor and his almost seemed like daily press conferences, they talked a lot about 100 and some different health districts. And I remember coming into the office after that mantra started. It was kind of a backbeat, if you'll accept that term. I said, watch out. The administration, in this case the DeWine administration, is going to seek to eliminate some of these jurisdictions. And sure enough, that is what's happened. There's a legislative sponsor, but from all that I can gather, all I can read, and all that our state rep has been able to piece together, it really looks like it's an initiative from the DeWine administration. So, I say that at some risk, but it's really the kind of thing that at the same time that they were talking about the number of health districts, there was an appropriate pat on the back, almost, I don't want to be sacrilegious, but almost a glorification of frontline workers, public health workers, doing all kinds of great things. In fact, they were, and it's really, makes you, it's doesn't quite set well with me that now in the state budget bill, it's where they decided to introduce this in the middle of all this other spending and all these other things, they're going to come in and try to whack city health departments. So I guess that's, I hope that's not what people think of the response that was made all throughout the state by health department employees in smaller communities. I'd make the case, and I don't want to go on too long, that in a smaller community, that health department has a tighter link with those parts of the community that are in need of vaccinations and other key services. You know, for the most part, if you talk to younger parents, the health department is where they get their mandated vaccinations to go to school. And again, for the most part, not exclusively, the doctor's offices really are not the main place that kids go to get vaccinated. So seems to me to be a disconnect in really understanding the role in a small community that public health agency plays. And so, you know, people who know me, have worked around me, the last thing I need is to find some crusade to jump on the white horse and ride into. But I tell you what, this is the kind of thing that makes people distrust government and makes me really not quite understand from whom the people in state government are taking advice. It's certainly not those people involved in public health in smaller communities here in Ohio. Last thing I want to say about that, I want to emphasize again that this is an amendment that's being introduced into the state budget bill. And so Representative McLean was quick to point out, I was quick to agree. In fact, we were thinking the same thing. You know, separate this out. If it's good public policy to get rid of smaller health districts, then have it go through the committee process, introduce standalone legislation, and you know, those of us in smaller communities, we're not unaccustomed to being put in second place or whatever you might want to say when it comes to state government. The big cities, the big counties tend to prevail, but you know, this is sort of an unprovoked and really not very appropriate way of saying thanks to health district employees throughout the state. Heck, they're still involved in the pandemic, and some knuckleheads in Columbus are trying to wipe them out. Something else. Sometimes you think you get a little older, you've seen everything. I guess not. Last thing I'll say about the health department. You know, the state provides $1,900. That's what we get for a state subsidy to the health department. So, by and large, it's a self-supporting agency which city council and city government has continued to believe that it's worth supporting. I think heck, if you took a vote, either a straw poll or a voice or actually a roll call vote, I imagine it's 7-0 on city council. That while there are issues always with the health department and city council, I think everybody's strongly in favor of keeping that in place. So we get $1,900, less than $2,000 from the state. Just sort of a rhetorical question: how many thousand do you think we pay to the state in terms of licensing fees and other requirements? This would be the Gallion Health Department to the state of Ohio. We'll try $20,000 to $22,000. So, you know, I guess it's certainly not financial motivation, or they don't know how to do the math, but we get $1,900, we pay them $22,000, and they want to wipe out our health department. Sometimes you wonder, don't you? One more state thing, and then we'll see if we have some questions. Last week I was city council, and I've been talking with council members and kind of rumbling about, ruminating over the sort of quiet, I don't want to say death of the Freeze Center, but back in February there was all kinds of commotion about it, where the money was going to come from, decision by city council not to fund the engineering for some of the infrastructure. And for the most part, the conversation died off. I want to assure you that the work hasn't died off. And late last week, I got a call from Gary Frankhouse. He had started soon after the, I guess rejection. I don't mean to flame things up, but the rejection of the idea of the city funding the engineering. He continued to work on seeking state funding on our behalf to put together the necessary money to build. Forget the engineering. Do we have the money to build it if we can get it designed? And the short version of that story, with a happy ending, not this grumpy stuff like the RETA legislation or the health department legislation. But Gary called me last week, and he is through hard work and asking the right people and knowing what the right pocket of money, the tickle spot, as I sometimes say. He was able to secure a little over $460,000 for the roadway portion of that roadway extension back to the Freeze Center. So I think it's a big step forward. Tomorrow night there's going to be a conversation, bringing it to the Economic Development Committee about the need to get legislation to I think both request the funding formally, but be in a position to accept the funding. So that's a pretty big step forward. We talked about it, Gary and I talked about the possibility of going after some funding, and really pleased that he went ahead and dug into it. And there's a series of emails that I'll share tomorrow night that really confirm this with the department. No, it's not. It's Development Services Agency, DSA. It's kind of the what's left of the Department of Development. So, pretty cool thing. I'm hoping council's supportive of it. We'll talk a little bit tomorrow night about how I would suggest we fund the other elements of infrastructure. I'd heard from some council members that they really didn't want to use taxpayer revenue, so water or sewer revenue, and so there may be a way to use some other city funds that are not exactly taxpayer derived. But we'll get into the use of the capital improvements fund, the wisdom of that, and the value of that tomorrow night. So if you're someone who follows some of those committee meetings on Zoom, please tune in. I anticipate Mr. Frankhouse there. We'll throw another bouquet in his direction. And so I think what you find there is that, even though there are tension among individuals or points of view, the key is focusing on getting different things done, solving different pieces of the puzzle, and not focusing on the difficulties or what doesn't seem to be quite complete yet. So I found that a real energizing piece of information as somebody who has, for a long time, wanted to see something like the Freeze Center constructed. And so, we aren't there yet, but it is an important step forward in trying to fund the infrastructure, the support to be able to service the building once we figure out where all the funding's going to come from for the facility itself. So, anyways, state government dominating my thoughts this week. I do know that what I've been calling the big project for a couple of years. I was told today via email that ODOT filed the plans for the widening of Portland Way. So that's a little bit like getting your ticket for the big vacation air flight. I don't expect to be a vacation, but it's a tremendous step forward. And the north end, that trying to get through a galleon for people, trucks and others that are coming through off of 30. The ability to do commerce out there without it being quite so congested and such a high frequency of accidents, all those things will have, I don't know, transformative might be a little self-serving, but it's really going to change things in one of our most active commercial areas in town. So anyway, moving ahead, Portland Way expansion, new funding for the we don't have it named it yet, but it's going to have a name because it's going to have a destination, and and give us some time. And, you know, no guts, no glory, no risk, no gain. Those kinds of things still apply. I think prudent risk is the key here in terms of getting the Freeze Center built and satisfying as many of the different points of view as have sort of made themselves known over the last few months, the last few years, to be quite honest. All right, Matt, anything else?
Yeah, we do have a few questions tonight. Before I change topics, though, I did have one related to the Freeze Center.
Yeah.
This one came from Dennis. He just asked bonds for the Freeze Center.
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure exactly what that means. I think that there are some concerns about the original proposal. We'll talk about that in a little more detail of the Port Authority issuing bonds that then would be serviced by the income from the Freeze Foundation, and that the foundation would agree to buy those bonds at a fixed rate, a percentage of 3.5%. That's how that bond structure worked. There may be some technical problems. There may be some political problems, meaning not enough support for that idea. But there are other ways to get big projects accomplished. And one of them might involve the city having to become the entity that incurs the debt and work in a different combination or a different arrangement with the Port Authority to operate and to get the project up and running. So, yeah, that's been the proposal on the table, and we'll try to see if that idea can gain the support and that it isn't plagued with a technical flaw or another. That's straight up best answer I can make of a real complicated question.
Okay. All right, thanks, Mayor.
Yeah.
Next question tonight came from Tom. He asked, Bucyrus was awarded a Tree City USA. How did Galleon do?
We didn't apply. So it's like, gotta make those wise guy things. I would hate to think that if it's the usual Tom, that now it's a different Tom. We didn't apply. We didn't apply. It's not to say that is bad, but when Galleon has been a tree city in the past, one of the things that's happened is that the maintenance has really gone on kind of unchecked. We were a tree city and we were planting trees right underneath our electric wires, so I think that's a good thing. I know that the city is spending in Bucyrus, that is, a lot of money on trees. So, how did we do? We did not apply.
Okay. Next question tonight came from Terry. Suggestion rather than a question, but on the main thoroughfares other than the major intersections, how about having flashing red on the thoroughfares flashing yellow on the thoroughfares with red at the intersection or intersecting streets after 9 p.m.
Like on the traffic lights?
Correct.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to think about it. I had not given it any thought. It's a suggestion worth looking at. I do know how folks are pretty reluctant to change. But anyways, we'll take a look at it, Terry. Had not thought of that.
Okay. And then Samantha just had a correction going back to public health. She said public health departments are not mandated by state law.
No, you don't have to have a city health. You have to have a public health department. We need to be part of the county health department or health district or the city health district. Is that a question mark or a statement?
Health departments are not mandated; they are optional by state law.
Yeah, I don't dispute that at all. I think that it is. Yeah, I was talking with the editor of the paper one day last week, and he was asking me to peg down, and I couldn't off the top of my head when the city health department was founded, but it's been a pretty highly valued part of the city for, I don't know, 60 years at least. I remember getting my polio vaccine from a city health nurse. So, long tradition. If a discussion, one of the things that I think people want to make sure of is that people who need public health, people who don't have the transportation resources, maybe don't have the insurance, maybe don't have all of the ability to get those services at a doctor or at a urgent care center, that they still have access to those key services. So we can talk about what are the key services a little bit. And, I was talking just this morning about how, the Bucyrus is only 15, 20 minutes away. I get that. But a lot of the things that people have grown accustomed to with the city health department are things that they can get by going right uptown. So, there may be a debate. First of all, it may be a moot point if this stays in the state budget bill. I'm letting people know that have the inclination to speak up for their city health department, and that it's a House bill. So Reardon McLean is our guy that you've got to contact. If the legislation goes through and they eliminate it, it may not be anything to talk about. But I think that the city health department, with very few exceptions, heck, I can't think of an exception, has been a real asset to the city of Galion for generations. And I don't think you keep it just for tradition. I think it continues, has over the past few weeks shown its value. I'll yak on this for another second. We got 3 or 4 emails and testimonials about what a great job the health department had done in the vaccination. And however that happened, it's pretty uncommon. Whether somebody said, "Hey, please send a letter up to the mayor, he's an old grouch and we're afraid he's gonna chop our little finger off," or something. Or if it's like, "No, man, this is really good service. I know quality public service and I want to comment on it." But to get 5 or 6 letters, that's pretty uncommon. Voice of people appreciating the kind of service that they provide. So I guess part of my reaction is that that's a great way to kick a bunch of people throughout the state in city health departments who have worked hard while the politicians have stood in front of the camera, taken all the glory, and then they work behind the scenes to try to whack those people. Really, I don't know. Spent a lifetime in politics. It frustrates me, kind of what it's come into. But pretty nice try. Maybe they'll get by with it in Columbus, but not without quite a fuss from interesting number of communities around the state that have maintained that tradition of a city health department. So it's not just Galion, not just Shelby. There's some other folks who have done that, who now, because things are different, are less than 50,000 people. So that threshold, which would save a lot of the medium-sized cities, may not be the case as those kinds of towns tend to erode as the urban areas in Ohio grow. All right, I'll get off that soapbox. Any other questions?
Next one came from Renee. She just said to fix the roads, please.
Yeah, I tell you, when I came in here, I was on a particular street that isn't on the list, and I think there's a bid date to answer Renee in 2 different ways. This happens anytime you make a certain fix, and I'll just elaborate for a second. It's around the house or in a business or whatever. You fix something or you make a selection to make an improvement, and then what seems to happen invariably is over the next short period of time, everywhere you go, you see a street, in this case, that isn't on the list. One thing that I've really noticed, and one in particular is the Gill Avenue Church Street intersection. And without getting too far off, the intersection itself is in horrible shape. Now, all four legs of it that come into that intersection are in pretty good shape. Gill Avenue is real tree lined, as I think everyone knows, and that has a tendency to keep the pavement wet, and you just don't have the lifetime or the durability. But that intersection, another one that comes to mind while I'm talking about this would be Union and Atwood Street. None of the surfaces on the four legs. Atwood was just paved. The intersection itself and some of the, right by where there'd be a stop bar, if the paving markings were all complete. But you see a lot of potholes. So we're going to take another look at the street I won't name because everybody will say, yeah, you're right, you missed that one. And then some of these intersections. But I don't want to argue or disagree with Renee, but one of the things that I've found is in this job is that the people who complain the most about Galion streets, when you talk to them a little bit about it, they're people who don't get into many other cities, that don't get into cities. I won't even name names because I think every city does the best they can, but there are other small towns and medium-sized cities whose roadways condition I believe are in worse shape than ours. So I don't know. That'll provoke a big fight. But we're going to do paving. It's a bid date set, and our plan is to get the street paving that was selected by the street department, kind of validated by council, get that stuff going. It'll be in the middle of the summer because it's just how the bidding process works. But yeah, I agree with the general sentiment. Let's get some street paving done.
Okay, thanks, Mayor.
Yep.
Next question tonight came from David. Can anyone clarify what's happening with the 309 railroad crossing closure? Is it for repairs?
Yeah, I think it is. I think I got about four things. My wife is is my first line of what the heck's going on, and she had read that. I was just noticing myself, because I go over that crossing with some frequency, how bad it was getting. One thing that we'll check for sure, I would almost guarantee that coming from Marion, there'll be signs that direct people, state route closed at the railroad crossing, 3 miles ahead or whatever. And that'll direct that truck traffic, that out-of-town traffic down 288 to 19 and get around town in that way. The one that we'll have to contact ODOT about is to make sure that same notification is done in time to tell truckers to get off for those 4 days, to get off at 61 and do the reverse move, 61, to that part of 309 to Gelson-Leiter to 19 to 288, around that way. So yeah, it's repairing the grade crossing. It's in pretty bad shape. We don't get much pre-notification, but let's hope that they recognize and they put in something other than what's called a timber and asphalt crossing, that they put in a more permanent concrete base crossing. We won't know until that happens, but we'll kind of check probably after the fact, because I'm sure the work order for the railroad's already set in motion and they're ready to show up. It's the end of next week, I believe.
Yes, April 26th was the date they gave us.
Yeah. So that's, what's that, a week from today? Week from today, 4 days. Should be a marvelous time, but we'll work to do what we can to keep the out-of-town traffic from getting, up into Galion, and then the GPS routing them through, up Railroad Street and down Boston. And we've been through that routine before. Is that David? Is that who that was?
Yep.
Okay, thanks for allowing us to bring that just posted, we just found out about it, so glad that's getting out.
Okay, next question
Yep.
tonight came from Dennis. He asked for an update on a grocery store.
Nothing much new. The city is really not involved in working with whatever prospect the Galleon West owners have. And I think what we're waiting are two things, Dennis. One would be I'm way out of patience, and I don't want to get ranting and raving about it, but we've been trying to acquire property just east of the tracks on Harding Way for months and months. It's clearly a safety. Looks like heck, and it's a safety issue, and we have been blocked, obstructed at every pace. We're probably, it looks like we're going to, talking with the law director today, it looks like we'll probably ask council to go ahead and appropriate the property from them. So that would be one site. So that's snagged a little bit trying to acquire that. That would be a new grocery store. And then the other prospect or project that is, I think, more optimistic in the short term is that there is an investor that is invested in Galleon and a couple other places that is working on the details of the lease with Save-A-Lot and trying to work out a way that they can cooperatively come in and modernize that store and keep it under the existing lease, or in some way or another buy out that lease and get a new operator. So that project, I think, moves relatively slow because it's in the, really in the hands of an investor that wants to invest in Galleon, but also more critically in the hands of Save-A-Lot Corporate. And so it's been a difficult watch to repair, to work on, but I think, Dennis, that's probably the best prospect. As far as anyone looking at any of the, what you might call greenfield sites, the open real estate, we've really not had much interest in that. Not on our part, but on other people in the restaurant, in the grocery store industry. I think what you're seeing in that industry, at least what I can gather, is there's a real caution. I think there'll be some investment, there'll be some growth in the grocery business, but the uncertainty around how changing shopping patterns and what will be the grocery industry will look at is made it difficult to get somebody to really lay down the multiple millions of dollars they're going to have to take the risk. I mean, even if they had a building, they've got a few million to get up and running, and so we've been at 10,000 people. It makes it more difficult than if we had 15, but that's certainly no reason, and we really haven't stopped. But the shortest answer would have been, Dennis, I got nothing new on that, and I'm as frustrated as many other people are.
Okay, thanks, Mayor.
Yeah.
Next question tonight came from Julie.
Uh-huh.
She said, clean up old buildings. They look terrible, like the old car wash on Charles Street.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a difficult issue. It's like maybe this is one of the reasons we should only go on here once a month. Because the more often you're in this situation, the more often questions like that have an opportunity to be asked. There's a lot of properties in town. And I'm not going to engage in demonizing individual properties or property owners. We have and will continue to chip away at some of the worst properties, commercial properties that present a health or safety issue. That's why we're focused on the one on Harding Way East. But see if I can slough this off on council. We talked late last year, and we've talked several times at the committee level and among individual council members about, excuse me, dedicating a certain amount of money. You know, you can set that amount at just about any level you want. And investing city dollars in acquiring and demolishing some of these worst properties. I think there's a little bit of caution on the part of council to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so it really has not moved very far. One of the things with clearing the property is it still needs maintained, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it will be redeveloped. And I think that that's probably the case in some of the buildings that have been unoccupied, whether it's out on East Street or throughout the town, is that there's not a good use for it, so it sets without much demand for it or much demand for investment. That's a crappy answer. If I had to take two, I would answer it a little shorter, but I would say there really isn't much interest in using city funds, so you're really reliant on enforcement, and there's only so much that can be done, and that moves really very slowly, as you can see on the building that I've been talking about on Harding Way East. So I probably, our efforts, our results in addressing this issue are probably among the most unsatisfactory. As a citizen, it's like, yeah, we probably haven't done as much as some people think we should on that. I would acknowledge that. I'm not particularly proud of it, but I think it's the truth. I think it's the facts. Those are the facts. So, what else we got? I don't want to end on something as unfulfilling as that.
Sure. I had a couple more questions come in from Dennis.
Yeah.
First one is, are we still stocking the reservoirs with fish?
Not regularly. We haven't stocked them in a few years.
Okay.
I mean, we haven't heard from the fishing community about that. The other thing I'd say is we're getting ready to do quite a bit of work at the reservoir, plural, and so, but it's a good question. I think that's a good question for Matt to check into to see how that process works.
Will do. Dennis's other question was, what is the mayor's office stance on gun control?
The mayor's office doesn't have a stance on gun control. We passed an ordinance last year that said that we would stay in conformance with state law, that when we repealed a handful, council repealed a handful, not even a handful, but a few ordinances that were inconsistent with that state law. You know, personally, it's, you know, what you see happening with, it's not a chip, but more of a faster erosion of constitutional rights. It's got to be alarming. I think one of the things that's problematic right now, at least for me, this is an opinion, is that the two of the most heated and sometimes toxic subjects that people like to fight about on the national level, including Dennis maybe, is gun control and race. And so I think that's something that really concerns me. The issues of gun control, they happen among all types of ethnic and racial groups. And sometimes the polarization, the flaring up that's you feel like is right on the verge of happening as a result of the Floyd trial, to have that component. They mix racial concerns, and in this case not gun control concerns, but the more recent one in Minnesota was gun related. So that's, I mean, we don't have a position. We're not going to motivate it. We're not going to motivate any legislation to have more restrictive gun control. And we'll do what we can. Police department will certainly do what they can to stay compliant with state law. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what, I don't know what else to say about that. I think Second Amendment, it's not really debatable, but it's becoming debatable and being tinged in a lot of the 1619 implied racism stuff, so I'll stop there. See, one thing about that answer is it's so disjointed that somebody like Dennis or somebody who is trying to piece together a bunch of things that the mayor said to alarm people this fall, I don't know how you make sense out of that answer. But in any case, that's what I got for that answer. We're in the support the Constitution mode around here.
Dennis just said, good answer, Mayor.
All right. I don't know. My feet are getting tired from dancing around it, but it's small town. We haven't had too many problems with it. Let's hope that continues. But I think it's all, it's about responsible gun ownership, and but I'm like anyone else. It's horrific to think that a person goes to the store, goes to work, and all of a sudden their whole life is disrupted by the senseless stuff. But I don't think the gun control stops the senseless stuff, but we'll stop there. What else we got?
That was actually all I had.
All right, Freeze Foundation, be ready tomorrow night. We're going to probably not talk much about the projects, but if you're interested in what's been going on over the past 6 or 8 weeks to try to move the Freeze Center project forward, stay tuned. We'll talk about 629. What in the world that entails, and what a good deal it is for Galleon to accept that. And so tune in tomorrow, and we'll do that. And then Wednesday, I wish I had enough time and there was enough interest. There's a whole bunch of finance stuff on Wednesday. So if you're as crappy as TV is, even a Zoom meeting of Galleon City Council may compete for entertainment value, but in terms of civic importance, tomorrow night for sure. And then Wednesday night, there's some relatively important finance issues that we'll be talking about, probably including implications for city finances if we lose the revenue that is projected in that Senate Bill 157. So, all right, folks, I'm going to give you that as a homework assignment. The best thing about Galleon is the best thing that we can do for Galleon going forward is be informed about these issues and be engaged and informed electorate and citizenry. So, all right, that's your homework assignment. House Bill 110, Senate Bill 157. Read an article or two on it, and tune in tomorrow. There should be some really valuable information exchanged. We'll see if we can move the Freeze Center project off dead center. Good night.